Today we have some updates on Iran, plus 2 separate ICE shootings just days apart. Also make sure you stick around to the end of the episode so you can hear this week's installment of The Feed. All that and more right now. Welcome to episode 73 of the Republic Brothers podcast. He's Matt, I'm Mike, and today is July 15th. Please hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss our next episode. Now we're going to start today with Iran. U.S. Central Command launched a new wave of daylight airstrikes across Iran, marking an increase in tempo from previous bombing campaigns. Recent targets include coastal port towns and military hubs. President Trump declared the June ceasefire officially over and announced that the U.S. military would enforce a tight naval blockade on Iran. Trump stated that the U.S. intent is to effectively take over and secure the Strait of Hormuz. In retaliation for U.S. strikes, Tehran launched fresh salvos of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and suicide drones across the Persian Gulf. The militaries of Kuwait and Bahrain confirmed they intercepted numerous aerial threats targeting U.S. bases in Kuwait and the U.S. Fifth Fleet stationed in Bahrain. The IRGC has explicitly threatened to halt all regional oil and gas exports as long as U.S. operations continue. Multiple international commercial tankers and cargo vessels have been struck by missiles or external explosive devices off the coast of Oman and the UAE, resulting in civilian casualties.
We target military targets, and communists and terrorists target civilian targets and commercial infrastructure to scare us into submission. If you need another example of that, look at Ukraine for the last 4.5 years. This is just what they do. We would be wise to take all of their capabilities away from them. When Trump says Iran would use a nuclear weapon if they got one, these strikes should be evidence of that. They do not care who dies, and they want to use our fears against us. We see life the same way they see death. They don't care about civilian casualties. That is clear. My biggest criticism of Trump would be the more than 2-month pause in operations, which let Iran rebuild some capabilities and allowed them to collect some money to pay for this effort to strike back.
Yeah, I definitely don't think we should have paused. But President Trump is now saying that next week he's going to start taking out energy and bridges. Don't we think he should have already started that?
Well, I don't even know why he announced before that they were targets. We saw what happened last time. Iran made women and children stand next to the infrastructure to prevent us from striking it. As I just said, we care about civilian casualties while they don't. We aren't going to shoot at those targets if hundreds of innocent people will die. I understand why Trump says it. He hopes it will get them to bend to his will and negotiate. How many times have we said you can't negotiate with terrorists? The easy way of doing this was to keep striking while you negotiated. If you keep showing them your willingness to make their situation worse, they are more likely to give in. You mentioned energy and bridges. Those are normally the first targets in a war. Take out their energy infrastructure and their logistics networks, which includes rail lines, airports, and bridges. We didn't do that because we didn't want energy prices to spike globally, but you see what that resulted in. Energy prices are up, and this has dragged on. My opinion is it's time to end it. You started it with military conflict. You should be willing to end it. If Trump wasn't willing to do that, he never should have started it. Every target should be on the table, and you should be willing to sink their economy and make everyone in Iran understand the price they had to pay for having this leadership. Sink the economy, and the people of Iran may rise up and take care of the problem for you. But if they don't, you keep striking and use that blockade to do it by force.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is that if we go in and just take everything apart, eventually the citizens of Iran have to step up and say, okay, we have to step in here. I mean, wouldn't you think so?
They may get tired of the situation themselves on their own. My criticism is more from an internal perspective. Imagine you are back in high school and you decided to pick a fight with the high school bully. A fight you weren't sure you could win, but a fight you hoped if you were close enough, the other side would just give in, but you had no escape plan. Does that sound like a good plan to you? Would you pick a fight knowing you didn't have an off-ramp?
No, probably not. It doesn't sound smart.
The delays make me think Trump didn't have an off-ramp. He started it. Why can't we just finish it? I get that we don't want boots on the ground, but you could continuously pressure them. There's no rule from international law, which doesn't mean anything, that says you have to stop shooting to negotiate. You don't.
Well, we could easily finish this without actually even putting boots on the ground, right? We don't need the boots on the ground to finish this.
We could destroy their economy easily. We are at the point now where the people negotiating probably don't even have the power within their own country to actually enforce any agreement they actually sign. We're negotiating with the politicians, but the politicians aren't the ones with the guns.
Yeah, we kind of said that at the beginning of this, though, didn't we? The people that are negotiating, we don't even know who's really in charge. We know it's not the people that we're talking to. It's whoever has the support of the IRGC, right?
Yeah, there may be some blame to go on Israel on this one. Taking out leadership is absolutely a reasonable target if you're going for a complete victory. We started it, and then we backed off and didn't go for complete victory. By taking out their leadership, you completely destroyed their ability to negotiate. They don't know who is in charge, and they don't know who can actually enforce what we want to enforce.
Yeah, I don't like that when Operation Epic Fury started, you had Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth both talking a pretty big game about the things that we were doing in Iran, but we don't really hear that anymore. Now it's just kind of, well, they need to get back in order, and they need to do this, and they need to negotiate, but we're not hearing a whole lot of strength, I would say, being projected at this point.
Shortly after this whole thing started, you asked me a question that I think I absolutely nailed. You asked, is there any pressure on Donald Trump at the time? That question came, 4 months ago?
Yeah, roughly.
I said, not at the moment, but the longer it goes, the worse it gets and the more pressure is added. The closer you get to the midterms, the worse it gets for Trump. I feel like I nailed it, and I feel like Trump is trying to find the off-ramp, and that maybe he didn't have an exit strategy if he didn't win it within a couple weeks.
Here's the thing, though. So which option is going to get him more heat? A, he lets this continue on, and he lets Iran drag this out even longer. Like, let's say this goes on, several more months of us saying, oh, there's a ceasefire. Oh, there's not a ceasefire. Oh, we're negotiating. Oh, they attacked somebody else in the Strait of Hormuz. Or option B, we just level them. We just level them. We take everything out and move on.
It depends who you're judging by. The international community already doesn't like us, so they would hate us if we just leveled them. But the real important factor is internal politics. You can let this drag on for a couple more months if you win. If you win, and you can put that on your resume that says, yeah, it took a couple months longer than we wanted it to, but ultimately, we solved the biggest crisis in the Middle East. No big deal. Energy prices come back down. You're fine. If you don't get the win, Trump is probably in some big trouble. If energy prices are going to stay high for the next 6 months, potentially longer, it's a loss.
Okay,
if he doesn't have the win on Iran. If he doesn't get rid of the threat of nuclear weapons, and he doesn't end the threat of Iran shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and disrupting global oil supplies, that's a loss for Trump. If he can't do it, it's a loss.
Well, I was just about to ask you to define win, but we pretty much got that covered. So let's move on to the next topic here. Let's get into the recent ICE shootings. 2 highly publicized fatal ICE shootings happened just days apart. We had one in Houston, Texas, and the other in Biddeford, Maine. Both incidents have drawn heavy attention due to conflicting stories between federal officials and witnesses, alongside a lack of body camera footage. Now let's start with the Houston, Texas shooting. On Tuesday morning, July 7th, ICE agents conducted an enforcement operation in Houston's Magnolia Park neighborhood. They stopped a white work van driven by Lorenzo Salgado Orejo, a 52-year-old Mexican national who had lived in the United States for 35 years. He had 3 co-workers in the van with him. Agents claimed they received a tip and observed a van with an individual who resembled their target. They say Salgado Orejo ignored commands, rammed an ICE vehicle, and weaponized the van by trying to run over an agent. An officer fired in self-defense, striking him in the abdomen. The other passengers and local advocates dispute this, claiming ICE vehicles boxed them in and struck them first. They argue no officers were in danger of being run over when the agent opened fire. Then, just 6 days later, we had the Biddeford, Maine shooting. On Monday morning, July 13th, ICE agents were conducting surveillance outside a home in Biddeford, Maine. They attempted to stop a vehicle leaving the address. The driver was Joan Sebastian Guerrero, a 26-year-old Colombian national authorized to work in the U.S. DHS stated the vehicle attempted to flee the scene. Fearing for public safety and claiming the driver tried to use the vehicle as a weapon, an agent opened fire. The agent has been placed on leave. A neighbor on the 3rd floor reported hearing the gunshots and seeing the victim's car roll slowly into the intersection. The neighbor says he ran down and distinctly heard the dying driver say, "I tried to stop," while an officer told him he tried to run me over.
The witnesses in the Michael Brown case said Michael Brown had his hands up begging the police officers not to shoot. It turns out he was charging the police officers, not asking them not to shoot and not surrendering. Witness accounts are helpful at the time because you don't have a clear picture, but they aren't reliable information. The simple answer here is that these people probably shouldn't have been here in the first place. You should not have been here, yet you tried to use a 5,000-pound vehicle as a weapon. Yes, that is what it is when you are in an altercation. It doesn't matter if you are dealing with a civilian or a law enforcement officer. A 2-ton piece of metal is a weapon. Follow the law and this doesn't happen. But the general issue is people who don't follow the law before, i.e. breaking into the country and being illegal immigrants, and then they try to prevent being detained and potentially deported. Some even attempt to flee, and it results in avoidable deaths. I want to be very clear on this. The police and law enforcement do not decide how a stop goes. They don't choose who tries to flee and in what manner they attempt it. They only react to what happens once they try to initiate the stop.
Yeah, I agree. The vehicles are deadly weapons. If an agent's in the path of a fleeing car, they have a split second to react. When do we start holding people accountable for their own actions? The left is always saying that police need to be held accountable, right?
Yes.
And I agree. But that also applies to the people who interact with them. There's so many people who think that they're a lawyer because they saw a YouTube video, and those are the people who get themselves into trouble with their mouths. Now, we don't know exactly what happened with either one of these incidents because there's no clear video of it, but anytime someone gets pulled over, if things go south, I'd be willing to bet that it was not the cop who sent it in that direction. I could be wrong in this specific situation. We don't know yet, but I highly, highly doubt it.
An investigation should happen, but accountability has to go both ways. You and I can sit here and say, we know how to deal with police in any situation. We understand they are human beings just like we are, who would like to go home at the end of the day. They don't want to die just like us. In any situation where you have multiple armed people, you need to understand what the other side is thinking. It's not that difficult. Going home at the end of the day is the most important thing. You need to think ahead and determine how the other side will react to your actions. Sudden movements and hiding things or trying to flee when you are in a 2-ton weapon is not the best idea.
Yeah, it's always better to just listen. Just stop and listen and do what you're told. It's minor inconvenience, but after 5 minutes, they're going to say, okay, you're not who we're looking for. See you later.
And if you sit there and talk to them, you can probably work out most of the issues. But the bigger issues that need to be worked out, you don't work them out on the street. You work them out in the courts. The side of the road isn't the place to do it. Accept where you're at, listen to the commands the officer gives you, and follow instructions. And you will get a lawyer, and then you can fight those accusations, if you will, and try to win in court. You don't win on the side of the road.
Yeah, you never win on the side of the road. You can only lose on the side of the road. Now, as of yesterday, July 14th, ICE has paused all vehicle stops. Do you think that's an overcorrection to take some heat off, or do you think they're trying to rework the way they operate and their whole enforcement strategy?
It is a bit of an overcorrection, yes. As we said, police don't decide in the vast majority of cases how these go. I think this is done with the hopes to avoid the headlines. I think ICE will try to find a way to apprehend those they are targeting without having vehicles involved. If they can get them on the way to the vehicle, they will, or follow them and get them after they've exited the vehicle. I think the hope is there aren't any more incidents, but again, they don't control all factors.
Yeah, I did hear not too long ago, there was a witness that tells an account of the story that the guy actually did try to run over the cop, but I'm not sure if it was from the Maine incident or the Texas incident. But there will be more details that come out about this.
In the Maine incident, I saw a photo of the front end of the car, and the bullet the officer fired at the driver went directly through the front of the windshield. It was like the driver was driving right at the police officer.
Yeah. There was exactly 4 shots straight through the front of the windshield. They're all directly in the front. There's none in the side. So
all roughly head height, too.
Yeah. But regardless of that, let's move on to our last story here before we get to the feed. Let's talk about the biggest thing that nobody's talking about, and that is Cuba.
It surprises me this isn't a bigger story, but Cuba is facing one of the worst crises in its modern history. And surprisingly, it's a story that isn't getting any attention in the United States. Over the past several days, the country has experienced repeated nationwide blackouts, with the electrical grid collapsing multiple times. For Cuba's roughly 10 million residents, this isn't just an inconvenience. In many areas, people are living without electricity for 12 to 20 hours a day. And when the power goes out in Cuba, everything goes out. Water pumps stop working, traffic lights go dark, cell service becomes unreliable, food spoils, businesses close, and hospitals are forced to rely on generators. Imagine if an entire state lost power in the middle of the summer. Not for a few hours, but for days at a time, over and over again. The big question everyone will ask is, how did Cuba get here? The answer is that several major problems have collided all at once. First, Cuba simply doesn't have enough fuel. The country produces only about 40% of the oil it needs and has historically relied on imports from countries like Venezuela, Russia, and Mexico. But shipments have fallen dramatically in recent years, leaving power plants without enough fuel to keep the lights on. Second, Cuba's infrastructure is old. Many of its power plants are more than 3 decades old, and years of deferred maintenance have left the electrical grid extremely fragile. Think of it like a car with 300,000 miles on it. Eventually, parts begin failing faster than you can repair them. Third, the Cuban economy has struggled for years. Tourism, one of the country's biggest sources of foreign currency, was devastated by the COVID-19 pandemic and has never fully recovered. Inflation, food shortages, and a wave of immigration have made matters even worse. Those are the points everyone agrees on, but finally, there is the political debate. The Cuban government argues that U.S. sanctions and restrictions on fuel shipments are largely responsible for the crisis. Critics of the government argue that decades of centralized economic policies and underinvestment created the conditions for this collapse long before recent events. The reality is both factors are almost certainly contributing. What happens next is the big question. There are a few possible paths forward. Cuba could secure additional oil shipments from allies like Russia or Venezuela, but that will be difficult with the U.S. blockade. It could negotiate with the U.S. for sanctions relief or humanitarian exemptions. The government could also pursue broader economic reforms and encourage more foreign investment. But none of those solutions are quick or easy. For now, the most likely outcome is continued instability. More blackouts, more economic hardship, and more Cubans leaving the country in search of a better life. The biggest thing to watch over the coming months is fuel. If Cuba can secure a stable supply of oil, conditions could improve relatively quickly. If not, the country could be headed towards its worst humanitarian crisis since the collapse of the Soviet Union more than 30 years ago. Cuba isn't dealing with one problem. It's dealing with an energy crisis, an economic crisis, an infrastructure crisis, and a political crisis all at the same time. And that's why it's one of the more important stories in the world, yet many people still don't talk about it.
So why is no one really talking about this? You don't see this on the news anywhere.
Cuba is a relatively small nation, an island nation in the Caribbean, so it's not within the realm of force of any European, African, or Asian country. The simple issue Cuba has is they don't really have any allies close, and they've never been friendly to the one giant next to them. They don't provide anything of substance to the U.S. The only thing most people can think of that Cubans export to the U.S. are cigars, which aren't even actually legal. There's not much that can happen in Cuba that will have a major impact on the U.S. The only real thing is a potential humanitarian crisis, which could cause a mass exodus from Cuba and cause our immigration system to be overwhelmed. Given where we are at right now, that isn't as large of a concern as it would have been 3 or 4 years ago, so it's not a big talking point. Not to mention, the left loves to talk about failures of the Trump administration, but Cuba is a country that is around 75% conservative, so liberals don't love the idea of talking about them and potentially making them a state like they love the idea with Puerto Rico, since that would be adding another state around the size of Georgia, which is solidly red. Cubans simply don't want communism, since they have seen the result of it.
All right, well, let's get to the end of the show here, everyone. It is time for The Feed. This is the segment where we take all the funny videos we saw on our social media feeds this week, and we break them down one by one. So let's get started. Here is clip number 1.
I realize that we are the only country on Earth where when you see a fleet of fighter jets approaching, you know something cool is going to happen. We send them to the Daytona 500 to kick off so that every asshole there can go, look at that. But if you're in the Hindu Kush province of Afghanistan and you see 7 F-22s, you're not like, oh yeah, today's the race.
That is exactly why our healthcare isn't free, and we love it. It's funny how true this is for us, though. We love showing off those fighter jets.
Most Americans don't truly understand just how privileged we are. We see the coolest fighter jets and bombers in our lives regularly, and we think it's just cool. It is a bit of a spectacle that we get billion-dollar jets flying over our events. That's how you know we are the best at it. It isn't a game, it's an event. I remember watching the Daytona 500 pre-race coverage this year, And the people covering it weren't normally covering this type of sport. And they described it as feeling like they were under attack because the Thunderbirds were doing rehearsals while they were on air. It is great for everyone. The people get to see something cool, and the military gets practice working on time on target attacks.
All right, here is clip number 2.
So you're saying that we should, again, be able to use the law, you're just saying to defend.
What I'm saying is today, if someone lifts a rock to come hit me over the head, he won't be asked to put it down. He'll be tackled.
Right.
And if there are enough of those, there'll be less rocks being thrown. For the same reason that we see lower gun crime in areas where we have higher gun ownership. Let me use an example for hockey. So I don't know if you know this, but in hockey, there were people who were called enforcers for a long time. They didn't score any goals their entire career. They just fought. And it was very important. Here's why.
Yeah.
Because let's say Wayne Gretzky, he wouldn't allow himself to be traded unless he had Dave Semenko and I believe McSorley traded with him because they protected him. The reason why these guys just fought is because a penalty from the ref, the government, putting you in a penalty box is worth it for a player on the other team if he breaks Wayne Gretzky's knee and he can't play in the playoffs, right? The consequence was Semenko or McSorley is going to come out and beat the shit out of you, right? They're going to enforce it. So what happened is there were fewer injuries. There's a player named Crosby who had more concussions in one season when they changed those rules than Gretzky had his entire career.
Yeah.
Having those enforcers on the bench, as rarely as they had to fight, set the tone where there was self-enforcement.
This is such a perfect analogy for our defense. He's basically saying peace through strength. We don't want to fight, but we will if we have to, and you know it, and everyone else knows it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the bigger and badder your guns are, the less likely someone is to mess with you. Nobody messed with the biggest kid in school. It's still true today. There are guys in hockey that people just won't mess with. This is the self-policing part of sports that translates to the real world.
All right, and here's our next clip. This is 2 clips together from Will Cain's show.
If you want to talk about pay disparity, the Women's World Cup players get paid out 20% of the total revenue. The men get paid out 7%. As a percentage point, they are getting much more. The problem is, for anybody desiring equal pay, and by the way, I think equal pay is a ridiculous concept in and of itself. If the women generate more revenue, they should get paid more than the men. Don't strive for getting the same, strive for getting what you're worth. And if you're worth more, then get more.
2018, probably. The issue was equal pay between the U.S. men's and women's national soccer team. I'm explaining, quite honestly, basic economics to people here. Because the debate is always like unfair, sexist. Well, today the news is out that U.S. soccer was awarded $15 million for the men's national team performance at the World Cup. It's going to distribute $6 million to both the men's and women's teams, split it evenly, which is totally unfair. The women negotiated at that time a base level salary. Men do not. The men get nothing, no base. They get paid nothing, only a chunk of the percentage that they earn. So now the women have a base and the upside. The men have no base and they share the upside. The Women's World Cup will not generate this number of eyeballs, will not generate that level of revenue. And so the men are handing over some gigantic percentage of what they earned to the women.
Now, this new system is crazy. Imagine if this were the other way around, though, and the men got a chunk of the women's prize money. Like if the women made more than the men did, I don't think they'd be very happy about it. The sad part is the women know this isn't fair. Like they know they're getting a handout.
I would slightly disagree and say most of the women don't realize they are getting a handout. The WNBA thinks they should be making the same amount as the NBA. I completely agree with Will Cain in that clip, both parts. And I'll provide some context for you here. The clip of Will Cain explaining this at the beginning was from the last World Cup cycle. The women's prize pool was $30 million paid out from $131 million in revenue. The men's prize pool was $400 million paid out from more than $6 billion in revenue. The women got a larger percentage than the men. Will Cain is completely right. The old CBA they had said the women got annual salaries and maternity leave and health care and all the other stuff they got. The only thing men got was a check for showing up to the game. No benefits, nothing. It was a check that said, here's your money. The women, this time though, in CBA negotiations, got everything they wanted because the men gave it to them. Now they split the prize pool, and for the men to get close to the amount of money back from the Women's World Cup, the U.S. team has to win it. And that still will be less than they got for making the round of 16 this time around. The simple reality is most nations do not support their women's teams, so women's soccer will never generate the revenue the men's game does.
It's not even really all just about the support that they get either. It's just that no one really wants to watch women's sports when they can watch the men.
People would watch it if it was a better product, but when there's so many other nations that will not give a dollar to the athletes playing the game, getting better, the competition level simply can't rise fast enough to catch up.
Yeah, but if you had every nation, they all decided that they're going to pour all this money into their women's soccer team, it's still not going to make as much as the men's World Cup. Because no matter how good they get and how much training they have, people are still not going to watch it as much as they will watch the men.
The men will always be bigger, faster, and stronger, yes. But why does women's tennis generate the money it does? If the athletes are elite and it's competitive and fair, people will watch. People love sports. That's simple. It's really simple. The issue is there aren't that many nations competing. Will Kane has long said, do not strive for equal pay, strive for what you are worth. He's spot on. In most sports, in particular team sports, women will never get to where the men are. Women's ice hockey's never going to match the NHL. The WNBA will never be able to match the NBA. But in individual sports like golf or tennis, they have a shot because the competition is level, and you aren't necessarily comparing women to men. All the people that want women to make the same amount of money as men would be wise to stop comparing their sport to the men. Women's golf players are never hitting the ball as far as men. Don't try and grow it by comparing it to men. Grow it by comparing each of your competitors.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just don't think that anybody that's watching it is ever going to not compare it to the men's sport. You're just never going to be able to get that out of somebody's head when they watch a woman tee off or they watch Serena Williams serve. They're automatically thinking, well, so-and-so is hitting it however much further or however much harder.
Well, you can get there, but you need drastic changes. For example, you need to be able to define what a woman is and have everyone in society sit there and tell you that men and women aren't the same and that they're not playing the same sport. Serena Williams said men's and women's tennis isn't the same sport.
Yeah. That would be a good start.
If you could completely separate them, you could generate far more interest. You also have the WNBA issue where all the WNBA players hate Caitlin Clark, even though she's the ocean and they're all the boats in it.
All right. We spent a ton of time on that. Let's move on to our last clip here.
Why do we keep wasting so much money on all these deportations when solving illegal immigration in America is really easy? I can solve it with two pieces of legislation. Legislation 1. All employers in America have 30 days to remove all illegal immigrants from their payroll. During that 30 days, they have free access to E-Verify, no reason to not use it. And if at the end of that 30 days, those businesses are found to still be employing illegals, they are charged $1 million a day per illegal immigrant still working for them. You got 5 illegal immigrants working for you? You can absolutely continue to have them there, but it's going to cost you $5 million a day. Legislation 2. Illegal immigrants are not allowed any access to any federal or state level benefits. There, illegal immigration solved. 90% of them will just leave if they can't work, they can't get free shit. Like literally, what are they going to do? Nobody's going to employ them because nobody's going to risk $1 million a day fine. Shit, there are Wall Street firms that couldn't survive that. I guarantee you no construction company can. And if they're not getting paid because they don't have jobs and they can't get access to government benefits, we have basically starved them the f out. There, that's it. Illegal immigration solved itself.
I like it. First off, there is no illegal immigrant in this country generating more than $1 million of revenue a day. None. So this incentivizes them to get rid of them. The second point is even better, in my opinion, though. You want to keep the bad immigrants out? Take away the benefits of the U.S. system. You can come here, but you can't be a leech. Do you want to stay? Most would probably say no. The UK could really use this, by the way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't have a ton to say about this, to be honest. I agree. Let's do it. Why are we not already doing it? Well, that's it for episode 73 of the Republic Brothers podcast. Before we click away, please hit the subscribe or follow button. New episodes drop every Monday and Thursday. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.